Welcome to the Casting Forward podcast, brought to you by Clubmate, the all-in-one management platform for clubs and fisheries. We'll be talking all things fish and fishing with new guests every episode from the world of angling, from fishery managers to some of the best anglers in the country, finding out what they're up to, advice for your fishery and thoughts on the future of the sport. So let's get started. Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of the Casting Forward podcast. A bit of a new one for you today. We're actually out fishing. I've got with me today John Ellis from the Canal and Rivers Trust. How are you doing, John?
I'm doing all right. I don't very often get to see people fishing, so...
No, you know what it's like in angling. The more you actually do, the less you get to go fishing.
It's a bit like that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, which is why we've made the most of it tonight. John's come over to see me. We're at the beautiful Ferry Meadows. Not quite in all of its daylight glory, but we're taking advantage of conditions to film an episode of the podcast out at night time. It's always nice to be out at night. It's a mild night, isn't it, John?
Surprisingly so. Must be, what, 14, 15 degrees?
Yeah, it's lovely for the season, to be honest. It's what you might call a fishy night. I'm hoping my rods go off at some point soon, so if my alarm goes off and I go legging it, don't worry, I'll come back.
You'll come back, will you?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Right, so yeah, nice to see you, John. Obviously, we've been doing an awful lot this year with the kids, and I know you've been doing an awful lot with the Canal and Rivers Trust.
Been a busy season.
Yeah, it's been very busy. It only seems to get busier, doesn't it? So, just give everyone an idea for a start. If they don't know who you are, and I know you're a legend, I know everyone knows who you are. Just tell all the viewers today who you are and what you're up to.
John Ellis, National Fisheries and Angling Manager for the Canal and River Trust. I've been in the post for, been working for the organisation for about 37 years.
I could see you going greyer while you were saying that, to be honest.
Absolutely. Before that, this is almost a return home. Before that, I was 3 years as a fisheries officer in the Great Ouse catchment. So this is almost a return home to the fens. Before that, I was a research assistant at Liverpool University, actually studying grass carp.
Grass carp?
Yeah, they can eat.
Yeah, they can.
30 degrees centigrade, they can eat their own body weight in a day. That's what I found in some of the experiments I did.
Well, that's quite impressive. It's a bit like anglers, really.
I could think of one or two that might actually challenge that.
Seen some of them at the Premier Inn in the morning, John, can eat their own body weight before they go fishing.
You may say that, I couldn't possibly comment.
So, of course, it's pretty much a lifelong career with water, at least, if not angling, but certainly with water and fish.
Very much so, yeah. Started fishing, when I was about 5 years old. Never looked back, really. Don't get to fish very much anymore, which is one of the downsides of working in the industry.
Yeah. But if you're anything like me, you fall in love with the sport and the environment and the outdoors and the achievement of growing the sport. And you nearly, to an extent, and it's a bit sad I suppose, but you nearly forget about your fishing sometimes.
Yes, you do. And there's times when you need to actually get away from it. And so fishing's not a hobby I do anymore. Grow vegetables.
No, I mean, we've all got to have a hobby, I suppose. I mean, I just like to get fishing. It's hard. You know, when you're in a position like yours, the phone's always going, isn't it? So even when you're fishing, everyone recognises you, everyone wants to talk, and the phone never stops.
That was one of the problems I used to find when I went on the matches, particularly on the canals.
Yeah.
Anything that was wrong, people would be
blaming you,
moaning about it at the draw, when you're on your way to your peg, even during the match. And
yeah, and of course, everyone, when you're on a match especially, everyone skylines you, because everyone stands behind you wanting to chat all day, don't they?
There's a little bit of that, yeah.
So what made you, where did the job at the Canal and Rivers Trust kind of come into it then? How did that come about?
It's always better to be lucky than good, I think. In the mid-80s, what was then British Waterways decided that they could make a lot more. They thought they could make a lot more money out of fishing. And before me, there was a bloke called Tom Letherland who had been appointed as fisheries manager right back in about 67, 68. Barbara Castle, the sort of stalwart Labour MP, she brought something in called the Transport Act, and in that act it gave a statutory duty for the British Waterways to provide fishing. And they appointed a fisheries officer for the whole country. His name was Tom Letherland, and he was a one-man band for one-man band for years.
Sounds familiar, John.
And they decided that they needed 3 regional fisheries officers. And I actually applied for the one in the north, which was based in Nantwich, and I really wanted, because my parents lived not that far away, Shropshire Cheshire border, and I was really hoping to get that job. I didn't get that one, but they offered me the one in the south, working alongside Tom in the Watford office, and it was actually double the salary from what Anglian Water Authority fisheries team were paying.
Bit of a no-brainer then.
So it was a bit of a no-brainer. So that was 1988, and I've sort of been here ever since, really.
Yeah, so did you grow up around Nantwich and kind of Cheshire then?
Grew up Shropshire Cheshire border on the farm. Was actually in both counties, which was quite interesting. My granddad had 2 votes, one in one constituency, one in another, at one stage.
That's called edging your bets a bit, isn't it?
Yeah, you don't get that now, but that was 45 general election, you got 2 votes. But
so you grew up fishing the canals?
I grew up fishing. There was a pond, it was about, what, half an acre, full of cruising carp.
Yeah.
And also, my granny and granddad lived in a village called Grimley Brook, on the banks of the Llangollen Canal. Used to stay there quite a bit at weekends. And my Uncle Bill used to take me, we used to catch gudgeon. So
I was going to say, I bet you've earned a few gudgeon mugs in your time, haven't you?
there wasn't much else in the Llangollen Canal. Gudgeon was the main thing. Strangely enough, the odd trout, which they must have been coming in from the Dee.
Yeah.
A few eels. Fishing's got much better on there now than it was in the 70s.
I mean, I think, for all the people that decry the death of angling and how, the pollution, and, we've got a lot of issues that we've got to deal with. But if you look back to how hard it was years ago, I mean, even in my younger days and in your younger days, it was such hard work to actually go. You really had to work for your fish. And to be honest, I think we're blessed more than ever with the amount of fish in, canals and rivers.
I think we are overall, actually. I mean, I suppose I wouldn't classify myself as a sort of expert on canals in one sense, but because I don't get to fish enough of them.
No.
But the weights are higher.
Yeah.
And when I was fishing matches in the 70s, throughout the 80s, 3 or 4 pound was like an expected winning weight on open matches on the canal network in the Midlands.
And you've got these.
And now people expect at least 8.
Yeah.
And sometimes double figures.
I think these rose-tinted spectacles, as they always say, and that people always remember these, the red letter days, but they can't remember the 20, matches between that where they caught nothing.
That's
they
right.
caught about 4 ounces or 1 gudgeon.
Yeah.
And obviously, and this comes up an awful lot in fishing, we've got, the advent of commercial fishing, which obviously spoiled people's expectation of what they can catch. Now obviously commercials are fantastic if that's your cup of tea, and there's some fantastic commercials out there, but you need to be able to kind of divide the mindset and realise that if you go to one, it's a very different experience than going to the other, and you're not going to go catch 150, 200, if not more pound of carp at a commercial and then turn up at a canal, 3 or 4 pounds, just as much of an achievement, if not more sometimes.
Yeah, probably takes more skill.
Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously different skills in fishing commercials, but
a lot of the commercial fishing's about efficiency. There's skills in like stamina and efficiency of catching them big fish all day long, and
how quickly you can
how
land
much
them.
bait you can how much bait you can get out and how you land them. Whereas obviously on the canals and on the rivers, you've still got to work a venue out, and you've got to fish the right line on the right bait, and
because they haven't got to eat your bait to survive on a natural fishery, have they?
No.
But on a commercial,
no, we're
if they're not eating yours, they've got to be eating something.
Yeah, no, they've got to eat something in a commercial fishery. There's not a lot of natural food there, whereas even on venues like we're on tonight at Ferry Meadows, it's a massive natural water, really. There's tons of weed, tons of insects, plant life and all those kind of things. It makes it a lot harder to convince them to come and eat your one little grain of corn or your one maggot in the middle of, what's nearly 100 acres across the 2 lakes at Ferry Meadows and on, hundreds of miles of canal. I think sometimes we forget the fact that we're lucky when one, swims through our swim and takes a bite. And I think someone said to me very recently that, when fishing's looked at as a cruel sport, and obviously there's this, in the modern age when we're hooking fish, there's an argument about the cruelty of fishing, but we're actually trying to celebrate these fish, and in every other way but putting a hook in them, we try and look after them. you know, in terms of fish welfare. And what we're trying to do is take them out of the water for that brief minute as a window to look at these fish and really celebrate the wildlife that's under the water, and then put it back home and, you know, let it carry on, and hopefully for generations to come.
Let's hope so, Rob.
Yeah, well, otherwise we're out of a job, John.
Well, for me, probably not actually, in the sense that if there was no fishing on our canal network, somebody'd have to look after the fish and make sure the rescue and engineering
obviously.
works. And there's all the legal framework around, you know, fish passes and the eels regulations. But I think I get as much satisfaction from particularly the work we're doing with Let's Fish as I do about the fish biology side.
Yeah. Obviously, I was going to move on to that. I think, even though, you know, head of fisheries though you are, I think you're probably most famous for the, you know, the kids fishing, the junior stuff. You know, the Let's Fish campaign with the Canal and Rivers Trust, and obviously the National Celebration and the Daiwa Global, both of which have just passed and been very successful. I think, if anything, you're known nationwide for your, especially Go Live. You know, Go Live with John Ellis is, you know, prime time television. So where did that come from? You know, was it your idea? Was this your genesis, that, you know, the Let's Fish and the success of it?
I've come full circle. When I was 13, I started a junior fishing club in my village, the Grunley Brook Angling Club. And there wasn't a lot to do in Grunley Brook in the 1970s. You know, there wasn't, you know, there certainly wasn't Facebook, there wasn't much television. And every kid in the village came and fished the matches. And that club actually kept going until, I don't know, 92, 93, when I could basically no longer run it because I couldn't afford a mortgage and to keep running up from Watford to Shropshire every weekend. But I've always had an interest in, you know, in getting young kids involved. And I suppose really when Canal and River Trust became a charity, all of a sudden it became important that we engaged with anglers again and got more people back on our waterways. And it was obvious to me, and obvious from the rod licence figures, that the number of anglers in the sport was dropping. Still is dropping if you look at rod licence sales, and you can argue whether they're the best measure, but they're certainly one measure. And so I thought, well, I better do something about this. Canal and River Trust wanted me to try and do something about this. And I remember ringing up a friend from years ago who I taught to fish, a lad called Simon Mottram. I said, Motty, got a bit of a problem. How do we get kids fishing again? He said, well, it's easy. He said, all you got to do, you know, is do what you did at Grunley Brook. He said, but just on a national scale. And I think he's probably right, but doing it on a national scale,
I mean, it's easily said, isn't it?
yes,
yeah.
But I'm not really. The model is no different, essentially, to what we were doing in the 70s and 80s, only that back in that era, nipping it, in the 70s there was 5 fishing clubs with a junior section in Whitchurch, Shropshire, population 8,000.
Yeah.
So on a Sunday morning, there'd be, at the start of the season in June, there'd have to be 50 or 60 kids in Whitchurch fishing a match. Now, I'm not saying they were all still fishing by the time it got down to October and the Canal Autumn Leagues. They wouldn't be, but there'd still be 20 going.
I mean, it's unheard of these days to see 50 kids out fishing at the same time. I mean, outside of the, you know, the stuff that you've done with the Let's Fish and the National Celebration, and, you know, some of the other events, you know, the Get Fishing with the Angling Trust, you know, some of these events are larger, but organically speaking, you are not going to get 50 kids fishing anywhere organically without some kind of organisation. Yeah. Obviously, Let's Fish has gone from strength to strength every year, and it's kind of outgrowing the volunteers at the moment. You know, we're trying to chase new volunteers, and obviously you're keen to. Obviously, we've just come off the back of the Daiwa Global. If you want to tell us how that went last weekend.
That was best ever. I mean, a little bit of other history. Most people won't know that it actually started as something called United by Birmingham, which was part of the Commonwealth Games. So the organisers asked us to put on a fishing event for young people as part of the Commonwealth Games celebration. So I thought, what am I going to do? And I come up with the idea that we could try and find a representative from every Commonwealth country, or at least as many as I could find. And I think we had 16 different nations sort of represented. Daiwa were watching it for some reason on Facebook Live or something, and said, quite like the idea of this. I went up to Wishaw and spoke to Martin Green and Stephen McAvaney, and we came up with the idea of expanding it and trying to get a team from as many communities as we could. And I think we had 32 last year, and this year we had 36. And we do the stuff with the opening ceremony, and they're all carrying a flag, and it's quite good. In fact, you know, we've got some great plans for next year. Got a kid from New Zealand who's already practicing his haka. Got a bagpiper lined up to pipe in the Scottish team, and we're going to expand on that side of it, but also want to find more anglers from more diverse communities. Particularly,
it's a remarkable achievement. You know,
particularly Eastern Europeans, but very poorly represented. You know, but from the East European nations at the moment.
Yeah.
And there's an awful lot of East European anglers. You know, there should be a team from, you know, full teams from Romania and Lithuania and, you know, some of the like the former Yugoslav states. Why shouldn't there be?
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable, really. I mean, there's a lot of Eastern European anglers and a core tradition in those countries of angling. A lot of them fishing in the UK, but you know, what you're doing, you know, what we're all trying to do at our clubs is trying to integrate those different communities and realise we're all after the same thing. You know, we all enjoy fishing, and we need to get the next generation of all the nationalities fishing as well. You know, I think it helps. You know, schools are so integrated these days. They learn all the, you know, they're all learning the same languages, and you know, get on together as well as any kind of nationalities would. So I think we'll probably grow into more of that, you know, integration as the generations go on. But yeah, I think it's something to aim for, is to get the Eastern European communities with full teams, you know, next year and the year after.
Absolutely. Yeah, going back to it, 220 kids.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Which was really good. On the national celebration, we had 356 actually line the bank, as there was 380 odd names in the draw, and it's been a record every single year. When we started in 2017, I had 17 kids. Then we had 48 the following year.
What year was that?
First year was 2017, we had 17. 2018, I think there was 48. Then we had 93. Then I think we had 107 in the COVID year. Then it was 202. Then 288. Then 330. Now 356. Next stop, got to be in the 400.
Yeah. I mean, there's one remarkable fact about John, is that John has a remarkable memory for facts and figures. John seems to be able to remember every number every year. You can remember what peg every kid fished on a Let's Fish or a national celebration. You can remember what the weather was like 5 years ago.
The weather was always sunny, Rob. Everybody knows that it never rains at the national celebration.
Well, except when I went, apparently.
Except when you, exactly. Yeah, the only day you've ever been, and look what happened.
Yeah,
you know,
so
pours down.
I guess it's my fault. I won't go next year.
It's actually the first time that we've been seriously negatively affected by rain.
Yeah.
We've been so lucky over the years. Last year's Daiwa, we had Storm Babette on the Thursday and the Friday, and everybody said, you've just got to cancel this. The roads were underwater, the canal was flowing like the Trenton flood, and I took the stupid decision that we were going to go ahead. About 9 people couldn't make it because they were trapped, you know, because of flood water and stuff. But we went ahead, and I think that did so much for our reputation, because it would have been easy to cancel it. This year it poured down all the Friday evening. Roads were getting flooded, but then about 7:30 it stopped, and it was sunny all day, and then it rained all night again. So we're often quite lucky with the weather.
I mean, sometimes you've just got to have faith, haven't you?
Yeah.
Blind faith will carry you through.
Yeah.
So just go into a little bit of how you get these kids to the national celebration or the Daiwa Global celebration, because obviously 400 kids or 300 kids, 200 kids don't just turn up on a day.
No.
You can't just advertise an event and all of a sudden 350 kids turn up. So
no, that
where do we?
Work. It's all really from the hard work of the Let's Fish clubs, and they're a real diverse bunch. Some are much more successful than others, but at the heart of it is the Let's Fish introductory fishing session, where we give one-to-one coaching, they get a full hour, they can come back as many times as they like within reason, and we try and teach them the correct skills from the beginning. It's not about sticking a whip in their hand. This is a bit more technical than that. We're trying to teach them, proper bait presentation.
Yeah, like true angling skills as such.
Yeah, the old-fashioned angling skills that my dad emphasised with me. You've got to get the bait presentation right, got to get the feeding right. Hook sizes and stuff.
I think your events are the greatest example of getting kids truly fishing. As you said, it's not about just sticking a whip in a kid's hand, because everyone will come and have a nice day. Everyone's happy to come and catch a few silvers, and they walk away. They don't actually know how to fish any more than they did when they turned up.
Yeah, and they sort of tick it off their list. Been fishing, and it's not about that. We want, and it's hard. If we could recruit one angler per day, that's about as much as most people won't want to be lifelong anglers, but it's a numbers game.
Yeah, and it's a slow game, obviously. Obviously I'm doing loads with juniors at my own club at Peterborough. The challenge is that we can all pat ourselves on the back with this, putting whips in kids' hands. You can get kind of distracted by the numbers and think, well, we had 200 kids come to whip sessions this year, but we never saw any of them again. And to see the kind of end-to-end process where you've got kids coming to Let's Fish, joining the regional celebrations, and then ending up actually competitively fishing a match in the national celebration.
And those that don't ever want to, and it's more like the London Marathon than it is the Olympic Games. It's not very serious. The ultimate objective is to win a gudgeon mug and make friends, and we really focus on that. And if you come last, you get the best pick of the prizes, as you've seen, which I think is the right way to do. If you want serious competition, then it's the Angling Trust Junior National. There's a place for serious competition, but the national celebration is more like the Great North.
I think it's kind of the perfect hybrid, because kids turn up at the national celebration, they're fishing a proper match in proper match conditions, in proper match rules.
Yes.
Yet they all get a prize, they all get to come up and have their minute on stage, they all get a medal. And like you said, the kid that comes last gets first pick of the prizes. So it's kind of the perfect way to kind of get kids into fishing without putting them off with the kind of seriousness of it.
The pressure is the pressure they create rather than us putting pressure on them. So for a kid that just comes once a year and otherwise wouldn't ever fish in a sort of match type situation, they're great. Some of them will be really inspired. You see kids, it's always the kid that comes very last of all that really interests me. Sometimes they pack up fishing, sometimes it makes them really determined.
A year or two down the line they pop out.
Kid from Telford, Sidney Burton, and he was absolutely stone last in the cadets, and I thought, well, we'll see him again. This year, he came 43rd out of 130. Brilliant. And when I announced he'd come last the previous year, the room just erupted in applause. He got the big,
I mean, you can't get a better sign of success with a kid, can you? To jump over 100 places, proper level of achievement, really developed in a single year. And I mean, God, it took me longer than 1 year to develop any angling skills. It took decades. Some would say I still don't have any now, to be honest. But of course, this can't all be done just by you. You're not the only one that's supporting these events. And as we all know in angling, an awful lot of it is on the back of volunteers. An awful lot of angling. And probably one of the biggest challenges we face is that there are so many aspects of angling that rely on volunteers, and it's hard to commit the time in a modern world where we're busier, where there's more to do, where things are more expensive. We need to earn more money, to then have enough spare time to dedicate to teaching people fishing, and not go fishing yourself, like we've said, give up your own fishing to teach kids or help on these events. So how many volunteers do you think you deal with on a yearly basis, and kind of how do they get there? How do you recruit these volunteers, or how does someone go about volunteering to help?
Yeah, well, we've got over 250 coaches on my database. Probably half of them are pretty active, to be fair, and it varies a bit from year to year depending on circumstances, but half of them are really regular, doing something most weeks or most fortnights, and we help them as much as we can. You know, they get paid expenses, so nobody's out of pocket for actually coaching through Let's Fish. We will pay for their training, do the level 2 and that sort of stuff, and they work that off as a bursary. I'm a great believer in volunteering. I don't want anybody to be out of pocket. I don't think you can give your time, but you shouldn't be giving your money as well.
I fully agree. You know, volunteers, even at my own club with coaches and bailiffs, I'd never want a volunteer to be out of pocket. It's kind of, I say bad enough, but you know, it's enough that they're giving up their own time and you know, they're part of their week and their own fishing time and their own enjoyment to kind of help out. The last thing we want to do is get them out of pocket. So you know, we need to reimburse their expenses, and we kind of need to give them something. You know, whether we provide clothing or uniform or some fishing access or whatever it might be, in every way that we can. While we might not have enough money in angling to pay them, we should give them as much as we can to reward them. And I mean, most of the best coaches, as you'll well know, they're certainly not in it for money. You know, they're not aiming for any money, but they're absolutely passionate about developing the sport, and they want to see the next generation of anglers.
And they get that satisfaction, don't they?
Yeah.
From, you know, and they get it at the national celebration when, you know, kids do well and have a good day. And
I mean, I defy anyone to actually take kids fishing in groups. You know, like if you go to a Let's Fish event and not enjoy it. Now, I've taken people who swear blind they never want to be a coach in their life. You know, never really wanted to work with kids. Maybe, you know, they would be afraid to be a teacher or something like that. But as soon as you've got a gang of kids who've caught their first ever fish and the smiles on the faces, you know, we've had loads of people that have then become coaches, or certainly happy to come to events and support it. And I defy anyone to actually not enjoy it. You know.
Yeah. So it's a moment of magic, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I know it's a daft thing, this gudgeon mug, but it's took a life of its own. You know, we've had different sponsors for it over the years, and a lot of the kids, particularly the ones aged between about 7 and 12, it's their biggest priority.
Yeah.
You know, got to get a gudgeon.
Like I say, you know, I went to the national celebration this year, and the rampant passion for a gudgeon mug is all anyone would speak about the whole day, was to make sure they'd secured that gudgeon so that they could have a gudgeon mug. And I think it's a remarkable idea, and I think, you know, that simple idea of a gudgeon mug is doing wonders for angling in general.
Yeah.
I think it's a miracle that, you know, kids are so passionate about a mug, you know, and all they need is to get a mug to be passionate about a gudgeon. Yeah. And then if they're passionate about a gudgeon, they're passionate about fish. And it's all in stepping stones to anglers.
Strangely magic about a gudgeon. I don't know what it is, but
I think it's the timeless fish, to be honest. I think it's a fish that has always been there, that we've all caught as a youngster, that we'll all continue to catch. And on the hardest day, you can still catch a gudgeon.
Yes, number of times that when I fish winter leagues, that literally one gudgeon, at least 3 times on River Severn, I weighed in one gudgeon.
Yeah.
For quite good points. You know, because there was
you can soon shoot up a section.
Half the section would blank, and then it was a question of whether your gudgeon was 4 drams, 8 drams, 12 drams. Or
I don't think
if you were really lucky, you know, you might have one over an ounce.
I was going to say, they don't make scales that go down that far anymore, do they? I think they all go in £2 increments these days.
Not in my day, they didn't. 4 drams was the old currency.
This episode of the Casting Forward podcast is brought to you by Clubmate, the all-in-one management platform for clubs and fisheries.
So, obviously we're looking at, you know, we're coming to the end of the season, so to speak, moving into winter as such. What are the plans for next year? I know obviously you want to get bigger. We've discussed some numbers already in this film. But how do you actively do that? What's the plans for expansion, and how do you do it?
Growth at grassroots level with more active clubs and more coaches within the existing clubs. So we're keen to hear from any club that'd like to get involved and work with us.
Yeah.
You know, I'd certainly sit down and go through what's expected in detail. It's not easy. You've got to be prepared to put on a programme from May right through into September. It's not, if you think having a one-off day is going to do any good, you can forget that. It's about consistent, steady, week in, week out, or fortnight in, fortnight out events programme. So you start to get people coming back regularly, developing that habit. It's no different really than what football or cricket would be.
Yeah, it's nearly building up a muscle memory for angling, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know, as it becomes a second nature, it becomes habit to you.
Exactly.
As we've said, you put on one open day and you're very proud of yourself because you've had a load of kids, but they won't remember a thing of it next year when they come to next year's one open day. So you've got to have that regular coaching program,
Yeah.
you know, every fortnight where you can see the progression of skills, and you've got a measurement, you know, recording that on, you know, however you record that in terms, and you know, and at the end of that, presenting them with something that says they've reached a certain standard. And
yeah, exactly.
And then obviously comes the competition side of it when we start moving into.
You know, and that's not for everybody.
No.
Some kids will never actually want to fish where there's other people around for whatever reason. I don't understand it quite personally.
I mean, you know, I'm obviously, you know, I'm out for a night's carp fishing tonight. We're not catching gudgeon at this time of night, but it's probably one of the bigger challenges. Now I know, you know, everything you've done at the Canal and Rivers Trust is fantastic, but at the same time, very heavily geared towards match fishing or match style fishing. I think kind of bringing specimen anglers into the sport is incredibly difficult because it's hard in its very nature to get numbers into it.
I think I'm a great believer that if you want to catch a 20-pound carp, you start with a gudgeon and a small roach, and it's a progression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think every kid should go catch a perch. You know, every
start
kid
off.
should.
I don't think that trying to bring people into carp fishing works. I think you start them off with the basics, and then they evolve into whatever ultimately fascinates them.
I mean, I agree.
And that changes. You know, and we've got a lot of kids. You know, they fish the national celebration, but they also go lure fishing.
Yeah.
You know, they're interested in pike. You know, I don't think most kids want to sit there for hours and days without a bite. Personally.
No, I mean, it's incredibly difficult.
Very little evidence.
I think there's a balancing act because in the day and age of media, you know, the YouTubes and, you know, Facebook and Instagram, you can see people with 40-pound carp and 50-pound carp, and you know what you don't see are the 100 blanks, the 100 nights that you've spent on the bank, or all the travelling and the miles. I mean, I know, you know, I've got good friends that travel 3-4 hours to a syndicate lake for an overnighter session. Now, if you tried to convince a kid that's how you start fishing, we'll never have another angler.
No, because it's, you know, and quite interestingly, and I won't name names, but quite a few of the really key players in the trade recognise this, and that's why they see Let's Fish as important.
Yeah, because of course, you know, some of the big names in the trade have really bought in, you know, very much so to what you're doing with Let's Fish, and I think they recognise that you can't bring anglers in at a professional level, and you can't bring anglers in at 40-pound carp and, you know, things of this nature. I mean,
Bring on the local canal. Half the population live within 5 miles of one of our waterways, which is, you know, which is amazing.
Not round here though.
Not round here, not in the fens. No, I mean the fen drains a canal really.
Yeah, I mean we've got some fantastic fishing. I mean we've just had the third round of the Winter League this weekend. On March fishes fantastically well.
Yeah.
You know, the town Welland in Spalding down the road from here.
Some fish,
even Kai managed to catch a few.
Right, they must be solid.
Yeah, it must be.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Just going back to this thing about kids and the image of the sport. We've started working with the Staffordshire School Games Coordinators. This is basically our programme to work with schools. And a couple of weeks ago there was 3 or 4 school games coordinators, and I said, what's your image? How do you think angling, what's it like? You know, how do you see it as non-anglers? And we're all non-anglers. And the one woman from a school in Stafford put her hand up, she says, well, blokes in tents sleeping and drinking beer, isn't it? I said, that's interesting. That's quite an interesting answer. And then she said, we won't catch anything today, will we? And I said, I'll be really disappointed and upset with my lead coach who's going to demonstrate if he doesn't catch a fish within the first 5 minutes. And I'll be flabbergasted if you don't either. Well, I could tell she didn't believe me. So we went out, Neil Powell's there, and Neil's just doing a quick demonstration. He puts his ball of ground bait in, cups it in, puts his rig out, first put, float goes under, ounce and a half roach, and she looks at me as if, wow, you weren't lying to me, were you? And then they all got fishing themselves, and they've all caught a gudgeon or a roach or a little perch or whatever within 5 minutes. And that blew them away. It opened up the educational possibilities because they thought that there's no way that kids are going to sit there for a week for one bite. And I said, it's just the opposite. It's constantly work and focus and 3 pinkies, making sure the rig's going right. And they got it. They actually realised that it was so good for the focus of the kid totally on the fishing. Yeah. And we've had some incredible results, feedback from kids with, you know, the parents are saying they got ADHD, they got autism. It sort of brings that a lot of that out. Yeah.
I mean, in a way, I think it's the same for all of us. I mean, it does help kids in that way, but all of us, with, you know, all the worries in life and whatever we've got going on, as soon as you're out fishing on the canal or wherever you might well be, that float's the only thing that matters. You know, it's the only thing in the world for that 6 hours. You know, you've sat there and all that you're bothered about is if that float's going through nicely, if it's going under. You know, it doesn't matter what bills you've got or what work's like on Monday, all you've got to worry about and all you will be thinking about is that one float. Yeah. And it's remarkable, and it's remarkable.
How am I going to get the next bite?
Yeah. And am I going to get a gudgeon mug?
Oh, absolutely.
But angling, and it's interesting that you say that. You know, the impression people had that it was, you know, blokes in tents with a beer.
And that's what the TV's done. You know, and I'm not sure it's helpful to recruitment if that's what the public think.
I mean, I'm not going to say that's a bad thing, because I mean there are some fantastic, you know, carp films out there and barbel films and all the rest of it. But what there isn't are films of what you're doing. You know, there aren't enough outlets in media. It'd be good to have both. We don't want to take this one away and have that one, but we need both, because there's probably not. I mean, when was the last time you saw a really high quality production of kids fishing on the canal or something of that nature? And if we can make media the same way that we do for...
Well, I've got 18 seconds on the BBC Midlands News.
I saw.
Yeah, which it's a start.
Fame and fortune, John.
The only, supposed to get 15 minutes, not 18 seconds.
I know. I mean, I've had to snatch him in the dark because he's so busy signing autographs all day that this is the only time he could give me. But yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. I've never had anyone say that, you know, they think it's blokes in tents with beer. The one that I hear most often is that it's, you know, lonely men out on their own, you know, strange blokes, you know, strange old men sat on their own in the rain kind of thing. And as such, we've got to kind of, you know, and what you're doing is fantastic for this, but we've got to dispel that myth. Yeah. Because angling is still exciting. You know,
and you can be part of a team if you want to be. You haven't got to be. Yeah. But we don't sell that team component. And a lot of kids that I think come into fishing want to be in teams, but they don't like rugby or football.
No, I mean, not everyone wants to run around in the mud and the cold.
It's not for them, but they still want to be, because I think all humans want to be part of a tribe or a team or a group. And I think fishing's missed out.
People always gravitate, don't they? People gravitate towards each other. Yeah. And angling's a wonderful, and it comes up so often that angling is many things to many people. You know, if you want to go sit in the middle of nowhere on your own and get away from everything else and everyone else in the world, you can. Yep. But it's forgotten that there's a team aspect to fishing. And, I mean, adult team fishing's in its decline. You know, team matches are probably, you know, less attended now than they ever have been. It used to be the core of fishing was team fishing on the canals and, you know, on the Nene, on the Welland around here. And it's in decline because, you know, individual glory's taken over a bit in the match world. You know, the big open matches and the big championships and things of that nature. But it can still be a team sport where you go with your mates, and that's long forgotten because it's hard. I think it's hard with kids now for an angler, you know, a junior, to find another kid that fishes in their class or, you know, something of that nature. Whereas, you know, like you said, harkening right back to where we started, you had every kid for miles, you know, fishing.
Every kid in Grunley Village.
Yeah.
Every boy. Yeah. Girls fishing was a real rarity. We only had one girl in our club. Yeah. Now that's one thing that has changed for the better. There was 61 girls in the national celebration.
Remarkable. It's one thing I would say, and especially in the last few years, it's been so many girls coming through, and female angling, you know, adult female anglers, but certainly in terms of the juniors, the amount of girls who were fishing on the national celebration, and incredibly talented. You know, not there just to make up the numbers. Some of the most
probably
talented
on
anglers.
Average better.
I would say so.
Particularly when they're young, they listen.
Yeah. little bit less adrenaline than the boys, I think. You know, get a little bit less carried away
and
sometimes.
they don't. Boys know it all, you know. But as the girls will listen to the coaches, and I think, you know, I mean, Kaylee Dowd's been brilliant. You know, she's a real role model, and she comes and presents the prizes, and she coaches quite a lot. But
yeah, I mean, I see it on socials. Absolutely fantastic and well liked, and obviously done a lot for done a lot for the sport. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, and all the girls want to be the next Kaylee Dowd. There's a real role model there.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, you know, we're getting so many more kind of adult female anglers now that they are going to be role models to the next generation. Whereas, you know, before this generation and going back to my youth and your youth, there were no female angling role models as such, or certainly not many.
No, I mean, I can't think.
I mean, I can't picture,
Yeah, I mean, in the 70s there was the ladies' national, but it didn't have the kudos, did it? I mean,
no, I mean, to be honest, obviously I'm the chairman at PDAA. Our president and vice president are Alan Haynes and Pauline Haynes. Now, Pauline
Alan
was the
Angling Times.
Angling Times. Yeah. But Pauline was the women's national champion back in the day.
Oh, okay.
You know, back in the early days. But back then there was just no coverage of it, was there? You know,
there wasn't. I mean, there was people like Lynn Baxter and you know, and that, but.
Yeah, I mean, this is the
Claire
advantage these days of having so many media outlets, and it's kind of the angel and the devil on your shoulder, isn't it, really? Because for every bad, there's some good in media. At least we can celebrate the smallest achievement. You know, everyone's got a camera and a phone, and everyone's got YouTube, and everyone's got Instagram. At least we can celebrate this success and really show off these role models. And I think there's fish rolling out there, perhaps.
Yeah.
Hopefully so. Hopefully this rod's going to go off sometime soon. But it is, again, let's just say it's a lovely evening to be out. It's so comfortable out here tonight.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. So let's get back to you a little bit. Obviously, you said that you don't get much time fishing these days, but you must go occasionally. When was the last time you actually got fishing?
Blimey, now you're asking. I think it was. I did get roped in last. Wasn't this year? It was last year. We must have been really desperate. They needed a coach. So Pete Henry must have called me. Can't even remember where it was. Thoroughly enjoyed it though.
Yeah.
I think it was on the Trent Mersey. And it was one of those days where you had to really coach well, to manage the peg well. One of the great skills of a coach is to keep a let's fish peg going all day. Very easy in the first hour to catch lots of fish, but you've got to bear on, you've got somebody coming on the hour for 6 hours, and it's no good at telling them, oh, you should have been here in the morning, everybody caught a fish.
Yeah, I've been there and done it. You know, those first hour or two, everyone's catching fish, and you get to like the afternoon session, you know, the peg's been hammered all morning. The kids have been throwing in fistfuls of bait. Yeah, well, that's one of the worst things.
Absolutely, and that's swim management, and that's one of the things we teach, particularly with the likes of Simon Mottram. With every coach that's done their level 2, that's just a beginning.
We'll recently teach Canal Pairs champion again
for the fourth time in 11 years.
Yeah, remarkable.
Him and Simon Priest, fourth as well, twice.
Amazing achievement.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you're correct. We've been through the same where, you know, kids get excited. Obviously, they want to get a handful of maggots and throw a fistful in. And swim management's one of the most important things. You know, we can all lower a hook. You know, we can all put a hook in water, but, you know, we need something to come back out on the other end. Yeah. And so just teaching that skill of introducing 2 or 3 pinkies or 2 or 3 maggots every put through, and little and often, rather than just putting a load of bait out there. And it's the most important thing. And, you know, everything we've spoken about today is about successful angling, you know, making people
we put a lot of thought into it. We haven't got all the answers, but we've got most of the questions.
We've got a lot of the questions.
And we've... you look back and, you know, we weren't very good when we started. And you know what frustrates me? You see so many people, really well-meaning people, go their own way and end up spending 5 years making all the stupid mistakes that we've already made. Yeah. My advice is don't bother. Come and talk to us and you'll save yourself 5 years, because we've done all... You know, we know all the ways to get things wrong.
I think that's what we all do. You know, your life, my life, you know, all the experience involved is about saving other people 10 years. You know,
Yeah.
whether it's running a club or Let's Fish or teaching kids or, you know, online like we do with Clubmate. It's about kind of shortening the journey that's taken us decades.
And you touched on something earlier, Rob, and I should have commented on it really, is there's lots of well-meaning coaches that have hardly ever created any anglers with the habit, and I think that's that's sadness. They've done all these numbers, and you say, well, how many kids go fishing regularly? I asked one, I won't name him, a couple of years ago. So how many kids do you think have you coached in the last 5 years that go fishing regularly? And he was there. He said, he looked at me and his brain was like, he said, do you know what, John? He said, honestly, I don't think I've created one.
Yeah.
And this is a really nice guy.
What a sad moment of realisation.
Yeah. But his coaching career has effectively been
not achieved anything, you know. Effectively,
it's not a Let's Fish coach, by the way, but it's another guy I know. And
like we said, you know, as we all know, rod licence numbers are in general decline and have been for many years. Revenue might be up because the prices have increased, but you know, the actual numbers of rod licences sold are in decline, or if not, you know, levelling off just. But more than likely,
what's very interesting, if you look at this year's figures, hidden in there is like a 4% decline in the full adult sales.
Yeah.
You know, they might have sold more short-term 7-day licences or whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
but if you're a regular angler,
for the cost involved, if
you're
going
to go regularly, you're going to buy your 35 quid.
Yeah,
if you're going to go literally once a year, or then you'll buy the short term.
We're not talking 500 quid for a commitment for a year, are we?
No, we're talking 35.
If you've got any intention to carry on fishing, you'd buy the full licence.
Even now, especially now, it lasts for 12 months rather than
rolling,
say it runs out in April.
Yeah, now that it's rolling and that you don't have to buy it in April or June every year.
So I think the industry's got a real problem, and EA Fisheries funding has got a real problem.
You know, we've got a lot of scratching heads to do, I think, and you know, the stuff you're doing with the kids, the Let's Fish, is a key part of that future. But I think there's a lot of other questions out there. Obviously, we're all facing some major challenges, whether it's predation or pollution, participation. These things all seem to be against us, but and I think it's a real asset to angling that people's passion and drive for angling keeps us going, probably against all the odds. You know, I think we've got some massive challenges. Obviously, when it comes to kind of invasive species, it varies throughout the country, but we've all got our own challenges. Here where we are today on Ferry Meadows, we've got a large problem with cormorants. Although not an invasive species, they're certainly, you know, a piscivorous bird that's eating a lot of fish, that's causing a lot of damage to the underwater ecosystem. Whereas, on the Canal network, invasive duckweed's a massive issue.
We've got, we've got various things. We've got floating pennywort.
Yeah,
we've certainly got a zolla. You know, we've got zander in some of the Midlands canals.
And I mean,
which have a very different impact on canals than they do round here in the fens, where they're not really.
No, they're
not an issue.
Not present in major numbers, and I think
very different ecosystems. One's, ours are very turbid, very constantly silt in suspension because of boat traffic. And you look at Phil Smith's work, which is the only science available. And rubbish it if you want, but you've got to come up with alternatives in science. And Phil's is the best work out there that shows the negative impact that they have on native fish stock.
It's a very challenging question, obviously. It's always a controversial one. I don't want to hang on for it too long, but obviously zander is a big issue for the Canal and River Trust. And I don't think people understand if they're not part of the system, or they don't know the science behind it. Because like you said, on the fens it's not a major issue. What we've got is very few but very large zander that are celebrated as specimens. And people, in this area perhaps, who don't do any research, all they see is, why would you want to kill a fine specimen fish? Whereas obviously on some of the Canal network, they're present in massive numbers, but in very small sizes, in huge numbers, and causing quite a lot of issue with the ecosystem.
And of course, it's the Canal network joins river catchments.
Yeah.
So, I ain't got a problem with zander in the Great Ouse catchment, personally. They were stocked there legally, which is, to me, a fundamental difference to the canal system. I don't think that the sport of angling can condone illegal activity, because it doesn't put us on the model high ground. We can't say it's okay for us, because we're above everybody else, to start spreading species that we like and then have a go at others.
No, it's certainly, it's certainly not the case that anyone can say, well, we like this, or we don't like, killing anything. I mean, none of us want to kill anything, but as with many species, they have to, the management is required. It's not about execution. It's not about wiping out a species. And you were right. We don't want to manage any species, but fishery management is very important, and whether that's a plant or an animal. The same anglers that wouldn't want us to kill zander, perhaps, would probably have an issue with, say, cormorants or otters, or something similar. But we're not the people. There's certainly people a lot higher than your pay grade and mine, John, that make the decisions on what species should and shouldn't be allowed in.
Absolutely, venues. Yes. Canal and River Trust are not a regulator. We're the operator.
Yeah,
you may think the law's a bad law. But
law though it remains,
our KIFA permits say what they say.
Yeah, they do. They do. But like I say, harkening back, there's a lot of challenges in angling, but I think people such as yourself are key to the future and maintaining the sport, and I think we'll overcome all challenges.
Want to try,
Yeah, I mean, effort goes a long way in life, whether it's angling or work or family or anything else. Effort always goes a long way, and it's clear, that you put so much effort and passion into what you do. Undeniably, obviously, I think you're known nationwide as the father of the national celebration. And it never rains most of the time on the national celebration. Obviously, we hope it's even bigger and better next year. Obviously, here at Clubmate, we like to support that. If we can do anything with our member clubs to encourage them to start teams.
Spread the word.
Spread the word.
The 13th and 14th of September 2025.
Yeah,
it'll be the first 400 plus peg kids match.
Yeah.
Since about 1998.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are mind-boggling. If you talk about participation in angling these days, it's nearly the largest event in the country, isn't it?
Second to Division 1.
The Division 1, yeah.
Bigger than the Winter League final, bigger than Division 2 national.
And these are people sometimes, and like I say, when I went this year, there was one lad, I don't know if you remember him, but it was his first time fishing. I think on the national celebration.
You get the odd one.
Yeah, you get the odd one.
Yeah, it's like that.
But when you're talking all the way from there to Team England juniors, you've got in the same match on, across a length of canal where you've got someone who might fish for England.
But isn't that great about this sport? And Charlie Drinkwater, who's a kid that sort of, not fair to say he's come exclusively through Let's Fish, because it's a bit more complicated than that, but he's been to events and took part in every national celebration. Charlie, world gold medalist. Yeah.
I mean, whoever they fish for, to see someone of such young talent who might achieve...
And guess what? He gets beat 3 pegs away by a kid that's in his first ever match.
Yeah, that's remarkable.
And what other sport could that happen?
Yeah.
If me and you took part in... It's the equivalent, the London Marathon, of us coming in the top 10 in the elite. Never going to happen, is it? But in fishing...
No, and in fishing every dog has his day, as they say. Yeah. You can fish next to the best in the world. Obviously, it may be nowhere more famously than Ferry Meadows, often known as Steve Ringer's favourite venue.
Exactly, Steve's the...
Yeah, obviously, Mr. Ferry Meadows himself, you can rock up in spring and be sat with Steve on one arm and Phil on the other, and you can beat them, many a times.
It's unique, isn't it, in that sense?
Unique sport, and fish have fins, as they say. On any day they can be in your peg. I think one of our earlier guests on the podcast, Mr. Martin Bowler himself, the one thing he said to me is, while fishing might not be as fashionable as it once was, and while we're always going to struggle to convince people that it's not a cruel sport and all these things, what it is it's a gateway to the British Isles. And there's so much beautiful country that we live in. There's so many things to look at, different rivers and canals, and the wildlife involved and the plants involved, where you can sit having a day's fishing, and on your very worst day, then you can watch some deer or some birds, or you can hear the pheasants in the fields. And I don't think, for that reason, I think angling will always survive. I think angling will always go on, because people always want to be in the great outdoors and get away from the rat race as such. And hopefully long may it continue. You think the same?
I do. Actually, I'm more convinced now than I perhaps was 30 or 40 years ago.
I think
particularly
we've got more structure.
as you look at mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah, particularly since COVID, it's a crisis. The world's getting a more dangerous place, isn't it? You know, we've got the Middle East conflict, and we've got Ukraine, and we've got the downside of social media, and we need, as a globe, an antidote to, all the challenges, all the negativity that we hear, global warming, etc. We don't have to worry about. It must be awful being a kid in some ways, because they face a much more uncertain future than I did.
I mean, it's a stark future. I mean, in previous decades when you and I were growing up, it was a growing world. There was disposable income and all the rest of it. Not that we thought so at the time, but
things were definitely getting better. But probably for the last 10 years, I don't think they really have been. Or maybe that's just me getting old. But that mental health thing, I think we're in a prime position in fishing.
Going back to what we said earlier, when it comes to mental health and angling, again, it can be many things to many people. Someone might want to just get away from the speed of life and the pressure and the stress, whereas someone might not be able to make friends and goes fishing and accidentally fishes in a team, or joins a Let's Fish or a regional celebration or a national celebration, fishes in a little team of 3, and then all of a sudden they're in a team of 6 for the junior national, and all of a sudden they're in a squad, at a club, and we've gone from not being able, being a bit maybe socially awkward to having friends for life.
Oh, I've got and I won't name names. I've got loads of examples that mums ring you up and tell you about how their kid has been transformed by fishing.
Yeah.
Their performance at school. Gone from barely being able to read and write. Yeah. But it's just give them confidence.
I suppose there's 2 things there. Firstly, like we've said, fishing will always be a gateway to the countryside, and it will always be a way to get people together. And because of that, I don't think it matters what the challenges are. We'll always fish in some fashion, and whether it's the fishing that you like or I like, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It's what everyone likes. And I think no matter what the challenge is, and we can be worried about all of the things we spoke about earlier, but I think fishing will always be there somewhere while water remains wet. I think we'll have fishing.
Yes.
Which is absolutely fantastic. At some point tonight, I'm going to try and crawl into the sleeping bag and go to sleep. So I suppose we better round out. So do you think you could just give the camera a look and just tell us how they can get in touch with you if they want to join any of the Let's Fish events or any regional celebrations? How can someone get hold of you or the Canal and River Trust to get involved?
Well, I'll tell you what, the easiest way is to drop us an email at lets.fish@canalrivertrust.org.uk. We've also got a pretty decent website, the Canal and River Trust website. On there, type in Let's Fish, and a whole load of information will come up. And we've also got a pretty good Facebook page, so you can give us a private message on that if needs be. And I will give you the dates of next year's national celebration, the 13th and 14th of September. It's going to be the biggest young people's event for nearly 30 years.
Yeah. So if you're interested, get in touch on the details John said, or you can get hold of us at Clubmate. You can email me, rob@clubmate.co.uk, have a conversation. I'm quite happy to pass you on to John and give you some details. John, it's been an absolute pleasure tonight. Thank you for coming out on an evening.
Yeah, sorry I ain't brought you any luck.
No, not so far, hopefully for the rest of the night. But it's been a pleasure having you, John. Nice to see you as ever. Thank you very much. And thank you guys for joining us again, and we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Casting Forward podcast, brought to you by Clubmate.
Thanks for listening. Join us next time for another exciting episode of the Casting Forward podcast, brought to you by Clubmate.